The only reason someone ever treats you like an option is because they believe you'll always be there. They assume you always answer their calls, always respond to their messages, always be available when they decide to show up. They take your kindness, your loyalty, and your patience as a sign of weakness. But the truth is, it's not weakness at all. It's strength. It takes strength to care deeply. It takes strength to give without expecting anything in return. It takes strength to love, even when love is not being reciprocated in the way it should be. But strength, when misplaced, can become a disadvantage. When you give the best of yourself to someone who only sees you as a backup plan, you are pouring into a cup that will never be full. Now let's be clear about something. You were never meant to be someone's second choice. You were never designed to sit on the sidelines while someone explores their options, only to come back to you when things don't work out elsewhere. And yet, that is exactly what happens when you allow yourself to be placed in a position where you are waiting for someone to recognize your value. People will only treat you the way you allow them to. If you act like an option, you will be treated like an option. If you tolerate inconsistency, you will be given inconsistency. If you settle for half-hearted efforts, you will receive half-hearted love. And why does this happen? Because people take for granted what they believe they will never lose. They assume that no matter how they treat you, no matter how much they neglect you, no matter how many times they leave and come back, you will still be there. Your presence becomes an expectation rather than a privilege. Your kindness becomes something they assume is endless. Your patience becomes something they believe they can always test. They fail to see that your love is not something that should ever be taken lightly. The hardest lesson to learn is that not everyone will appreciate what you bring to the table. Not everyone will recognize the value of your loyalty, your consistency, and your willingness to be there when they need you. Some people will only realize what they had after they lose it, but by then, it's no longer your concern. Because the moment you truly understand your worth, everything shifts. You stop chasing, you stop explaining, you stop trying to prove yourself to someone who was never meant to have access to you in the first place. This is where most people struggle. They think that by giving more, by proving their loyalty, by showing their dedication, they can somehow force someone to see their value. But value is not something you prove, it is something you embody. A diamond does not beg to be chosen. Gold does not chase after people, asking them to recognize its worth. These things are inherently valuable, whether someone sees it or not. And the same applies to you. If someone treats you like an option, it is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their inability to see it. Their blindness is not your burden. Their indecisiveness is not your responsibility. Their inability to appreciate you does not make you any less valuable. You do not need someone to validate your worth for it to exist. The moment you start believing in yourself, the moment you stop waiting for someone else's recognition, the moment you choose you, everything changes. Think about this. When you know what you bring to the table, you don't accept anything less than what you deserve. You don't entertain inconsistency. You don't allow people to come and go as they please. You don't let someone keep you on standby while they explore other options, only to return when it's convenient for them. You set the standard, and if someone can't meet that standard, they have no business being in your life. Too often, people fear walking away because they believe they will lose something valuable. But the truth is, you are not the one losing anything. They are. You are not the one missing out. They are the ones who will eventually realize that they let go of something real, something rare, something that cannot be replaced. And by the time they understand that, it's already too late. What many fail to understand is that relationships are not about chasing, proving, or convincing. They are about mutual respect, appreciation, and recognition of each other's value. If someone truly values you, they will show you through their actions, not just with words, not just when it's convenient, not just when they feel like it. They will prioritize you, they will invest in you, and they will never make you feel like you are an afterthought. But here's where it gets powerful. The moment you start treating yourself like the priority, the moment you set your own worth, the moment you stop allowing people to play games with your heart, that's when the dynamic shifts. When you remove yourself from a situation where you are not appreciated, you force the other person to face the consequences of their actions. They begin to realize that the stability, the love, the loyalty they once had is now gone. They feel the emptiness that your presence once filled. They start to understand that they had something rare and they lost it. And here's the secret. You don't need to do anything for them to feel this. You don't need to seek revenge. You don't need to make them jealous. You don't need to prove anything. Your absence speaks louder than any words ever could. You walking away is the lesson. Because when someone loses something real, when they lose something they can never find again, when they realize they can't just replace what they had with you, that is when the pain truly sets in. There comes a moment in life when you realize that holding on is no longer an option. You wake up one day and feel the weight of all the effort you've given, all the energy you poured into someone who never truly appreciated it. You start to see how much of yourself you have sacrificed just to keep a relationship afloat. How many times you've excused behavior that hurt you. How often you accepted the bare minimum because you believed that love meant patience, understanding, and endurance. But the truth is, love should never require you to abandon yourself. Love should never make you question your worth. Love should never feel like you are constantly fighting for a place in someone's life. When you give your time, your energy, and your emotions to someone who sees you as replaceable, you are allowing them to dictate your value. You are placing your happiness in their hands, hoping that one day they will wake up and finally see what you've been worth all along. But the hard truth is, if they haven't seen it by now, they probably never will. People don't appreciate what they believe they will always have. They don't value what they think will never leave. The more available you are, the more predictable you become, the more someone feels they can take you for granted. There's an undeniable power in removing yourself from a situation that no longer serves you. The moment you stop responding, stop chasing, stop trying to prove yourself, is the moment you take your power back. You are no longer allowing someone else to control how you feel, no longer waiting for validation, no longer seeking approval from someone who has never truly valued you. Detachment is not about indifference. It is about self-preservation. It is about understanding that your peace, your happiness, and your well-being are far more important than trying to force someone to see your worth. The hardest part of walking away is the fear of what comes next. The fear that maybe you're making a mistake. That maybe if you hold on just a little longer, things will change. But how many times have you already told yourself that? How many times have you convinced yourself to stay only to be met with the same disappointment? How many times have you ignored the signs, hoping that one day the situation would magically improve? But here's the truth. People don't change unless they want to. No amount of love, no amount of patience, no amount of waiting can force someone to see your worth if they are not ready to. And that's why detachment is so powerful. The moment you stop waiting, stop hoping, stop giving chances, is the moment the dynamic shifts. When someone realizes that they no longer have access to you, that they can no longer rely on your presence, that you are no longer waiting for them, that is when they start to feel the consequences of their actions. But by then, it's not about them anymore. It's about you. It's about reclaiming your time, your energy, your focus. It's about shifting your attention away from them and onto yourself. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has mastered the art of detachment, someone who no longer reacts to manipulation, someone who no longer begs for attention, someone who no longer lets their emotions be dictated by someone else's inconsistency. Detachment means you are no longer emotionally controlled by the presence or absence of another person. It means you have reached a point where their actions no longer define your self-worth. It means you have decided to be in control of your own happiness. It is in that moment when you finally detach that people begin to see what they lost. Because now they are forced to sit with the reality that you are no longer there. They can no longer rely on your love, your kindness, your loyalty. They no longer have the privilege of your presence. And that realization is more powerful than any words you could ever say. People will always underestimate what they believe will never leave. They will push boundaries, test limits, and assume that no matter what they do, you will still be there. But when you detach, when you choose yourself, when you stop allowing them to have access to you, the shift is undeniable. Suddenly, they are the ones left wondering, waiting, hoping. They are the ones now feeling the pain of your absence. And the irony? The moment they realize what they lost is often the moment you no longer care. There is a certain strength in knowing when to walk away, but there is even greater strength in staying silent while doing so. The moment you stop explaining yourself, stop justifying your choices, stop seeking closure from someone who never valued you in the first place, you step into a power that most people never access. Silence is not weakness. It is the ultimate form of control. It is the act of refusing to engage in battles that are beneath you. It is the choice to withhold your energy from people who only drain it. And when someone has treated you like an option, silence is the most effective response you can give. Silence forces them to sit with the consequences of their actions. It forces them to wonder what you are thinking, what you are feeling, and why you are no longer reacting the way they expect you to. When someone is used to you always being available, always reaching out, always trying to fix things, the sudden absence of your words and your presence becomes unsettling. They start to question if they ever really had control over you in the first place. They start to feel the void that your absence creates, and that void is more powerful than any confrontation, any argument, any attempt to make them see your worth. People often mistake silence for indifference, but that is not the case. Silence is not about not caring. It is about choosing not to waste your energy on someone who has already proven that they do not deserve it. It is about understanding that words mean nothing to those who do not respect you, that explanations are wasted on those who have already made up their minds. There is no need to tell someone what they lost. No need to list all the ways they took you for granted. No need to remind them of your worth. Because true power is in knowing that they will come to that realization on their own. When you stop engaging, when you remove your presence, when you walk away without looking back, you create a shift. Suddenly, the person who treated you like an option is left alone with their thoughts. And that silence, that space you create, it speaks louder than any words ever could. They start to replay every moment in their mind, analyzing where it all went wrong. They start to feel the absence of your attention, the absence of your care, the absence of your presence. And what once felt like control to them, keeping you on standby, knowing you would always be there, now feels like a loss they cannot undo. The reason silence is so powerful is that it takes away their ability to manipulate the situation. When you argue, when you explain, when you try to prove your worth, you are giving them something to hold on to. You are still engaging, still giving them access to your energy. But when you choose silence, you take that power away. You leave them with nothing but their own thoughts, their own regrets, their own realization that they miscalculated your value. This is why so many people fail to move on. because they believe they need closure. They believe they need an explanation. They believe they need to hear the words, "I'm sorry, I was wrong," before they can let go. But the truth is, closure is not something you get from someone else. It is something you give to yourself. You do not need their apology. You do not need their validation. You do not need their acknowledgement of your worth. Your worth exists whether they see it or not. Your value does not decrease just because someone failed to recognize it. The moment you embrace this, you free yourself. You free yourself from the need to be understood, from the need to be chosen, from the need to be validated. You stop looking for answers that do not matter. You stop waiting for a response that will never come. You stop giving energy to people who have already shown you who they are. And in that space of silence, in that absence of explanation, in that refusal to engage, you reclaim your power. They will feel the shift. They will notice the change. They will recognize, perhaps for the first time, that they have lost something real. And the irony, by the time they realize what they had, it will be too late. The moment you shift your focus from them to yourself, everything changes. The energy you once spent waiting for a message, analyzing their words, wondering if you were enough, now that energy belongs to you. It is no longer wasted on someone who failed to see your worth. It is no longer scattered in 1,000 directions, trying to please someone who never truly valued you. Instead, it is redirected, refocused, and reinvested where it belongs, in yourself. Because the real transformation begins the moment you stop chasing, stop waiting, and start building yourself into the person you were always meant to be. At first, it will feel unfamiliar. It will feel like something is missing, like a part of you is still searching for closure, for answers, for validation that will never come. That is the withdrawal from the attachment you once had. But as time passes, you will realize that what you were holding on to was nothing more than a fantasy of what could have been, not the reality of what was. Because the reality was this: you were treated like an option, strung along, made to feel like you were replaceable. And why would you ever want to hold on to that? Why would you ever give power to someone who never valued what they had in the first place? The greatest act of self-respect is deciding to pour into yourself instead of into someone who only took from you. You start to see that all the energy you once gave to them, your time, your love, your care, was actually your power. And the moment you reclaim it, the moment you redirect it toward yourself, something incredible happens. You become unstoppable. Because now that energy is fueling your growth. It is pushing you forward. It is building the life that was waiting for you all along. You begin to work on yourself, not to prove anything to them, but because you deserve it. You start taking care of your mind, feeding it with wisdom, filling it with knowledge, strengthening it with discipline. You stop wasting your days consumed by someone else's lack of appreciation and start investing your time in things that actually bring you fulfillment. Your focus shifts from why didn't they see my worth to how can I make my life even greater? And that shift is where the real power lies. There is nothing more attractive, nothing more magnetic than a person who knows their worth and moves accordingly. Not out of arrogance, not out of revenge, but out of a deep understanding that they deserve more. When you operate from that space, you no longer tolerate mediocrity. You no longer allow people to come and go as they please. You no longer settle for bare minimum effort, empty promises, or inconsistent behavior. You become the standard. And only those who are willing to rise to meet you will have a place in your life. And here's the irony. The moment you stop waiting for them to come back, the moment you stop hoping for an apology or closure, that is the moment they start to feel your absence. Because now they are no longer the center of your world. Now they see you thriving without them. Now they feel the weight of what they lost. And it's not because you tried to make them feel that way. It's because you finally chose yourself. But by then, their regret no longer matters. Their realization no longer affects you, because by the time they come back, by the time they reach out, by the time they realize what they had, you are no longer in the same place. You have outgrown the version of you that once settled, that once tolerated. And that is the true victory, not in making them regret, not in seeking revenge, but in becoming so fulfilled, so powerful, so at peace within yourself that their absence no longer affects you. When you choose to focus on yourself, you become a force. You stop trying to prove your worth and start living it. You stop looking for love in places that never deserved you and start embodying the love you always sought. And as you continue to grow, as you continue to evolve, you realize something powerful. The best revenge is not anger, not proving a point, not making them feel your pain. The best revenge is showing up for yourself every single day and building a life that they can never be a part of again. There comes a point when you realize that you are no longer the same person who tolerated being treated like an option. The version of you who settled for breadcrumbs, who waited for them to choose you, who questioned their worth because of someone else's lack of appreciation, that version of you no longer exists. And that is the ultimate shift. Because when you outgrow the patterns that once kept you trapped, when you finally understand your own value, there is no going back. People underestimate what happens when someone truly invests in themselves. When you start working on yourself, when you begin the process of healing, when you decide that you deserve better, you become unrecognizable not just to the people who once mistreated you, but even to yourself. The thoughts that used to consume you, the overanalyzing, the seeking of validation, the fear of being alone, it all begins to dissolve. What once kept you in a cycle of disappointment and unfulfilled expectations no longer holds power over you, because now you see clearly. It starts with a shift in focus. Instead of directing all of your energy outward, instead of wondering what they are doing, who they are with, if they miss you, you shift it inward. You start to ask different questions. What do I want? What kind of life do I want to create? What kind of relationships do I deserve? And as you dive deeper into that, you realize that the answer was never in them. It was always in you. The love you were waiting for from them was the love you needed to give yourself. The attention you were craving from them was the attention you needed to pour into your own growth. And the moment you embrace that, you enter an entirely new level of power. Your energy changes. You no longer walk around carrying the weight of someone else's inconsistency. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself to people who failed to see your value in the first place. You start to move differently, not from a place of hurt, not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of deep, unshakable confidence. And confidence is silent. It does not beg. It does not chase. It does not seek external approval. It simply is. The world starts responding to you in a different way. You attract opportunities that align with your worth. You surround yourself with people who respect you, who see your value without you having to convince them, and most importantly, you respect yourself. You stop making excuses for people's poor behavior. You stop justifying mistreatment. You stop accepting less than what you deserve. Because when you truly respect yourself, you demand better. Not through words, not through ultimatums, but through your actions. You walk away from anything that does not align with the standard you have set for your life. And here's what happens next. The same people who once took you for granted, the same ones who thought you would always be there, who assumed they could treat you as an option without consequences, they start to feel your absence. Because now they see the change. They see the glow. They see the version of you that no longer entertains their games, that no longer waits around, that no longer settles, and that realization hits differently. At first, they might not understand it. They might test the waters, send a message, try to see if they still have access to you. But what they don't realize is that you are no longer reachable at the level they left you at. You have elevated. And when you elevate, not everyone can come with you. You are no longer the same person who waited for their attention, who accepted inconsistency, who needed their validation. You have outgrown them, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because your standards have risen. And here's the truth. People always recognize value after they have lost access to it. But by the time they realize, by the time they feel the weight of what they lost, by the time they see you thriving, something else has happened. You no longer care. Because when you truly invest in yourself, when you build your life on your own terms, when you become the best version of yourself, their absence no longer affects you. You are too busy living the life you deserve. There is something undeniably powerful about detachment. When you finally let go, when you finally stop caring about how someone perceives you, when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who never valued you in the first place, that is when true transformation begins. It is not about revenge, not about making them feel the pain you once felt. It is about recognizing that the best thing you can ever do for yourself is to remove your energy from people who never deserved it. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You have spent so much time thinking about them, wondering if they ever truly cared, if they will ever regret treating you the way they did. But the truth is, their regrets, their realizations, their apologies, they no longer matter. What matters is that you are free. Free from waiting, free from questioning, free from chasing something that was never meant for you in the first place. And here's what happens next. You start to glow differently. Not because you are trying to impress them, not because you want them to see what they lost, but because you have finally chosen yourself. The energy you once poured into them now flows back to you. You wake up without the weight of uncertainty. You no longer feel drained from overanalyzing their words, their actions, their mixed signals. You feel light. And that lightness is something they will notice, even if you don't care anymore. People don't truly appreciate something until it's gone. It is a universal truth when you were available, when you were always there, when you were giving, forgiving, understanding. They saw it as something they could take for granted. They believed you would always be an option, that they could return whenever it suited them. But that illusion shatters the moment you stop being accessible. When they reach for you and find nothing, when they call and you don't answer, when they realize that they no longer have a place in your world, that is when they feel what you once felt. But the irony is that by then, you no longer care. You have moved beyond the version of yourself that needed their validation. You have built a life so fulfilling, so rich in purpose, so deeply aligned with your worth, that their absence is no longer felt. You are too focused on yourself, too invested in your growth, too busy creating the future you deserve to even notice whether they regret losing you or not. And this is where true power lies. Not in making them feel your pain, not in seeking revenge, but in becoming so fulfilled within yourself that their presence or absence no longer affects you. You realize that your value was never determined by them in the first place. You were always enough. You were always worthy. The only thing that changed was that you finally saw it for yourself. As time goes on, you begin to experience something beautiful. Peace. A peace so deep, so unshakable, that nothing from your past can disturb it. You no longer seek closure from them because you have given yourself the closure you needed. You no longer wonder if they think about you because you are too busy thinking about your own happiness. You no longer feel resentment because their actions no longer hold weight in your life. And in that peace, you find something even more powerful, self-love. The love that you once sought from them the validation you once needed, the reassurance you once craved, it all comes from within now. You don't need them to see your worth because you see it. You don't need them to regret losing you because you have already won. You become a person who no longer settles, a person who does not tolerate inconsistency, who does not beg for effort, who does not lower their standards to accommodate someone else's lack of appreciation. And that shift, that is what changes everything. Because from this point on, you will never allow yourself to be an option again. You will never shrink yourself for someone else's convenience. You will never question your worth based on someone else's inability to see it. And here's the real truth. When they do come back, when they do regret, when they do realize what they lost, it will no longer be about them. It will no longer be about whether or not they deserve another chance. It will be about you. And by then, you will have outgrown them completely.